So I think we're probably pretty good here. Anyone coming in late, we can always go over a few more topics, but I want to get started. So hey, welcome everybody today. Today is definitely a exciting topic, but can also be kind of a scary topic, I know, out there. So what we're going to really do is do kind of a, I don't want to call it a surface level, like I said, but I do want to do kind of a moderate dive into understanding the basics of color. So I know for some of you, this might not be brand new information, and others of you might, this might sound like foreign terminology, but hopefully by the end of this, we can at least get an idea. That way we can all kind of be on the same page when we're talking about color and kind of go from there. So first I want to introduce, I've got a great panel with us today, guys. First and foremost, I got Morgan Lynn here. He is our Epson rep, definitely a talented individual who's been doing this for a while. So go ahead and introduce yourself there, Morgan.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Sorry, Zach.
Syllables, we're all single syllables.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. Yeah.
To be on this call. So.
Always appreciate having you by. And guys, I want to introduce someone who's going to be another great asset here today, who's been doing this in the industry, a color guru in my mind here. Jim Davis is part of our leadership team, so I want to go ahead and introduce Jim as well.
Hey, good day to everyone. It's great to be here with you, and we really appreciate you taking time to be with us today as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming in here, Jim. And last but not least, Vincent. Vincent, he's always kind of in the background. If you guys haven't met him, he's making sure that everything runs smooth here, and he'll help answer some questions here today as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. Let's just dive in. All right. So first and foremost, let's give a kind of a basic overview of what we're going to be tackling today. I do want to talk about printer options, and the reason I bring that up is because, as you may know, there's a lot of color options out there. Ink sets all the way from Cmyk color set all the way to what you see here, a 12 color, one of the Epson's new flagship 9570s. So we're going to talk about a few basic terms. Again, just for those of you who haven't heard them before, maybe you just want to kind of get those, because it will be something that you definitely cross fairly often here. As well as some Icc profiles, kind of what they are, how do we find them, what do they really do for us. Very powerful tools. And then since we are talking about Epson, I want to bring up two things, their media manager and as well as their dashboard. So for any one of these units, technically right out of the box, we do have custom profiles that have been quite well calibrated to go right from the start there. And of course, a few print settings so to make sure that when you are printing in-house, that final output is going to be what we expect. And then, of course, some Q&A, which is what I want to open up for you guys, and then we can answer any questions you may have there. So if you were joining our first graphics webinar, kind of the big thing was garbage in equals garbage out. So I want to say, since I know all of you guys are super talented out there, we're starting with non-garbage files that are strong. So what I want to do is actually have a strong preparation, so that way when we get to the end of our final delivery there, we know everything's going to be consistent across the board, whether it's in-house or if we're outsourcing it. So first off, let's talk about these printers. Like I said with the P-Series, if you were coming from the older P-Series, we had to choose between a commercial or a standard edition. They have now changed that. So we have a full color set. If you got the violet in there as well as the light gray. The S-Series, if you're familiar with it, is a solvent-based printer. So these can go up to 10 color, which can also start to include metallic silvers, reds, white ink if you do need it, which is very kind of a cool specialty feature there. We also have the F-Series, which definitely our most popular printer right now. Cmyk, just a good old 4-color process. They also have a 64-inch version with a little bit of a different ink set that also includes a fluorescent yellow and a fluorescent pink, which is super exciting. And then I just threw the T-Series in here there. I know it's usually not the most hypercritical, but for those coming from that is a Cmyk printer as well. So let's just jump right into it. First is RGB versus Cmyk. Now, if those terms are new to you, we're talking RGB, red, green, blue, versus Cmyk, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Now, what we perceive and how we see, especially on screen, is going to be in the RGB color space. Now, when we finally go to print, since we are adding colors to basically a white substrate, we're going to be using the Cmyk process. Now, I don't want you to think that Cmyk limits you to just those 4 colors. Again, we do have these printers that have up to 12. That particular P9570 has a 99% Pantone match, which I'll show you a color chart here just so that can make more sense to you. First, though, I want to talk about the additive versus subtractive. So hopefully you guys can kind of see here, we have light versus basically our ink or our paints. So in RGB, as you're very used to on the screen that we're viewing right now, we're working with the light. So Now, on the other side, we do have the Cmyk inks that we're laying down onto a white base. So we're going to use those together to create a wide range and wide gamut of colors. So what I want to bring up here, and just real quick, I'm going to touch on some RIP software, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that as well. But what the RIP software is going to do, same with the Adobe suite, we're going to be taking those RGB values, letting the software work its magic, convert those values into proper Cmyk values, and that way we know we're going to get our reds are going to be consistent across the board. So what I want to show you here is kind of a color gamut comparison. So for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is actually, I consider this a very good visual representation. Now, for the sticklers out there, if we're talking about the human eye, technically we don't see in a circle as we do see here. This is really more just for a visual representation. So what I want to show you, first and foremost, hopefully you can see that Cmyk color gamut. That's that one that's in blue there in the very middle. So you can see not nearly as wide as basically this whole circle is our visual color gamut. So what we see through our eyes there. Now, what I will say is, if you can kind of see where that Pantone gamut reaches, you can see that we're actually significantly extending beyond the Cmyk gamut. Now, the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people ask, should I be working in an RGB color space? Should I be working in a Cmyk color space? And I will say with absolute certainty, stick with the sRGB color space. Reason being, again, if we are working with one of these 12 color printers, we are well beyond that Cmyk gamut that you see there. I can hit significant greens, bluer blues, redder reds, etc. So I don't want anyone limited in their color space. And another point to make is that if you are doing, if you're outsourcing some of your projects, that is going to be kind of the universal standard across the board, which any of these software, RIP softwares or Adobe can handle for us as well. Now, on the last, if you can see the yellow outline there, that's RGB. So what we can see here is a visual representation that our screen is always going to have a wider gamut. We're going to be able to hit colors and see colors on there that we typically would not be able to see within a Cmyk printer. So the reason I bring that up is because, if the question arises, well, what happens if these out-of-gamut colors, I hit the print button? Well, we're going to talk about a few rendering intents later. But what it's really going to do is take those out-of-gamut colors, shift them to the closest in-gamut colors, so that way our perception, basically everything remains the same and it's consistent across the board there. So I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out there, so definitely any questions, write them down and we'll tackle those at the end there. But I want to go over kind of the nitty-gritty first, and then we'll jump into some of the fun stuff. So since we talked about understanding those color spaces, let's talk about inconsistency, I should say. And this is probably one of the biggest things that we see. Now, unfortunately, I will say, without spending a significant portion on some of these pre-calibrated screens, the stuff that you're picking off of the shelves, half the time, I should say probably 90% of the time, who knows what they did to it. So, our brightness might be maxed out all the way, and they might have pushed the reds, or who knows. So what I recommend, if you can get your hands on one especially, and if you're doing this in a shop, this is very, very much encouraged, is something like an X1. And they make both spectrophotometers for profiling media types, but this particular one I'm showing here today is for calibrating your monitors. So the reason I say this is because if you want to see, have a universal value, as I put it here, that is going to be hit every time and it's going to make sense to anyone else out there, I do strongly encourage calibrating your monitors. Now, unfortunately, it's not as simple as just plugging and playing. A lot of other factors can crop up as well. One thing being, what's your viewing angle? What kind of lighting do you have in your room? Do you have your brightness maxed out? Is your brightness at a reasonable value? So there's a few things that we can do. And of course, I know we all want to, at the end of the day, what we see on screen is what we want to see on our print. But I do want to let you know that there are a lot of factors involved here. So, of course, with profiling, it's kind of a scientific, controlled way to hit those values every time. Now, back into what I was saying, where we're going to be focusing mostly on Photoshop, but a lot of this will translate across the board. So first thing I want to show you are the color settings inside of Photoshop. So you can see my working space here. I'm in an RGB working space, sRGB. Now, I told you before, we don't really want to work in that Cmyk. If I potentially need to convert that, there's a couple options out there. Web-coded is probably the most popular. Now, a couple things here. You can see on my color management policies here. What I'm doing is, let's just say someone sends me a file with the embedded profile inside of it. When I import that into the software, it's going to keep that embedded profile. Now I can always go back in there and change it. Just know that when you're doing that conversion, you can see color shifts in the artwork itself. So I do strongly encourage to start off working in that sRGB space if you can. I do want to talk really briefly, like I said, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but some of this conversion intent. So we're going to go over some of these here in a minute as well, but I just want to show you kind of the basics of how I have my settings here. And black point compensation, definitely recommended if you're converting from the RGB to the Cmyk spectrum. It'll definitely help. It'll kind of compare those two together and make sure that that black point is its most accurate as it can be. So here, I'm going to leave this up just real briefly here, but let's talk a little bit about the rendering intents inside of Photoshop. So you might see when you get towards the end there, you go ahead and the File Print button, whether you're letting the printer manage the files, or in this case, we'll be letting Photoshop manage the files. What it's going to manage our colors, excuse me. So what it's going to do, and we have multiple ways that we can tackle this. Just to play it safe, I say as a blanket statement here, perceptual is more often than not fine. A lot of people, if they just want to kind of see what they print what they see on screen, perceptual is a strong candidate. Now, if we are dealing with things such as logos that might be out of Gamut, or if we're dealing with Pantone match or something of that nature, the absolute color metric can absolutely help with that as well. Now, as you can see here with the drawbacks, is that sometimes, especially if we're doing photographs, portraits, that might not be our be-all, end-all. For that, I would usually recommend perceptual first and relative color metric if you do need to move those out of Gamut colors inside as well. Now, what I will say from here is saturation, probably something you're going to stay away from for most things. Now, you can see here, it will completely shift certain colors. So it really wants to preserve that saturation, as it says, which means we don't care if it's this particular red. We just want to make sure that it's nice and bright as that. So I want to jump from here into the actual printer, the print settings here from Photoshop. So a couple kind of cool things. I'm sure some of you probably already know about this out there, but I do just want to throw a few things at you. So once I'm here in Photoshop, you can see right now I have color handling for Photoshop. So what this means is Photoshop is going to use their own rendering intent. In this case, we have relative color metric. We could also change that to perceptual. And I'm allowed to pick my profile. So the cool thing about these is when you have these printers, you download the drivers, you download the dashboard, the media manager, you'll be able to import all of those profiles directly to the computer so you can have access to them from Photoshop. I know a lot of people kind of play around with this sometimes, and they just say, "Oh, well, I'll try a couple different, profiles." And I strongly encourage, Epson Media will always have profiles for those. Some of the third-party medias out there, they do have profiles made for them. Now, I will say with some of these newer printers, some of them play catch-up. So with this new 12-color printer, I know that some of the major RIP softwares now are able to combine with that as well. So if you are dealing with very high end, maybe Coca-Cola comes to your door or something like that, that's when those come into play significantly. I do want to talk about the normal printing and rendering intents again. So if I change my color handling to printer manages the colors, basically what we'll see is that whatever we set inside the printer, and again, these Epsons are pretty fantastic because when I actually load that paper in there, I will tell the printer what type I'm working with. So really out of the box, we can get some pretty extraordinary prints. But if I really want to take it that step further, I can have my own either custom profile or already created profile, and I can tell you that's going to be more color accurate at the end of the day there. So Icc Profiles, I know you guys have probably seen these terms come up a few times. Kind of like what are they is kind of where I want to start. So it comes from the International Color Consortium, and these guys have been around for a while now. And basically, they kind of banded together and said, hey, we need to have a reference for these particular media types and ink sets and all that nature to combine that makes sense with the way that we perceive things in the world. So, without going too deep into it, the geniuses over there kind of came up with some pretty sophisticated algorithms. And now we have these Icc profiles, which are directly tied from the printer, ink set, and the media as well. So if you're going for the utmost quality and want everything to kind of match, I do strongly encourage you find those profiles. And if you have any questions on that, we're always here to help on that side as well. Whether it's solvent printing or whether it's P-series, if you're dealing with canvas, fine art, we can absolutely help with any of those. But what I want to show you here is kind of document to device, as I put it. So the Icc profile is going to say, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, and I see where you're trying to send this information. So let me do a little bit of my own, use my brains behind it, and it'll actually convert that for us. So that way, when it does come out of the device, it'll be much more accurate to what we see on the screen. Again, consistency is what we're shooting for here. I do want to talk about these Epson Emx profiles as well, which are right here. So they kind of take it one step further, which is pretty cool. So for this particular one, it's on the S4600, which is a solvent printer, Cmyk. You can just see I have a standard banner profile here. Excuse me. So with this, what we can see is Epson does a little bit more than just add the color profiles. We have dry times, we have media tension. In this particular case, we have heating elements that we can change the temperature of. If we need to do something like, I have the auto skew here. If I'm seeing my rollers or maybe putting marks on there, I can increase or decrease the pressure on that. So you can see with one download, you're really getting pretty much every parameter needed to actually get that print going perfectly. So I do want to say, if you do see some media that's out there that you're not sure if there's a profile for, that's definitely a good reason to call in, talk to us, and see if we can help you guys get where you need to be. One last thing I want to talk about here is the Media Manager. So what I showed you on the screen here is the dashboard. The Media Manager is a really cool new tool that Epson's released with their newer P-series printers here. So anytime that a new media comes out for them, they'll be able actually to download that profile both into the computer, but also the hardware, which is going to be the printer itself, which is a huge thing because when I'm loading my paper, my media, I can actually tell it right there in the printer, here's what we're working with, make my settings appropriate as they need to be. So bottom line, I'm trying to tell you, there's a lot to color profiles, but a lot of people have done the heavy lifting for us. So there's a lot of great profiles that are already out there ready for us to work with. Let's go back a little bit to the RGB Cmyk. Now, we were talking about the Icc profiles, and now this is a great reason why we want to work with RGB and not with that Cmyk. So with the RGB, as we see here, device independent. So across the board, I can send that to whoever it may be, and it's not going to shift on me. We're going to keep those values consistent. With Cmyk, as you see, it's device dependent, which means the printer makes a difference, the media makes a difference, potentially even the batch of media can make the difference, the ink set can make a difference. So there's a lot more factors involved here as far as consistency goes. So strongly encouraged, especially if you are sending this out to multiple people or print shops, that RGB is always going to be the space we want to stay inside of. On the color topic, I do want to talk about spot colors as well, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to let you guys know kind of the value in these spot colors here. So as I say, specific printing. So in this shirt color I'm showing you here, this is the S8600. So you can see we have the option of a white, a metallic silver, or a cleaning cartridge, but in this case we have the white. So what I can do is inside of my Illustrator, I can actually set a specific spot color that's going to say, okay, when you hit this, I know you just want a pure white base laid down. And there's a lot more to it that we can dive in. And when it comes to like the software rips, if you want to have control over that, thicker, 2-pass, 3, whatever it might be. Same with the metallic ink, works the same way. And anyone out there who's kind of thinking about getting into maybe the stickers or the die cuts, things of that nature, the spot colors are going to be how the cutter will actually recognize where to cut. So those lines, if you have them set properly, won't actually show up on your print, but the information is still there. So when you do move it to your cutter, it is going to know what to work with. And of course, Pantone, if you're dealing with anything hyper-specific, usually at this point, I would very much say calibration would be necessary. Now, if you're dealing with these kind of customers, that's great. This time we might start to looking some of the proofing side of the world as well. But like I said, I want to kind of keep this one a little bit more surface level, and then we'll do some more of the deep diving, later on there. So a tool that I want to talk about as well that I don't, not a lot of people I've noticed kind of know about this tool, but it's the Epson Print Layout. It's a free download for Mac, PC, and now it's actually going to be supported on the the iPads as well. And so with these new P900s, 700s, and this also works with 9570s, any of the shirt colors, the newer shirt colors, I should say, will work just fine with it. And without having to, spend a lot of money, I wouldn't call this a graphic editor, but I would call this a fantastic, fantastic printing tool. You know, you have all your profiles built in, just like we were talking about on Photoshop. I can change my sizing, and since this is an Epson product directly tied to their printers, I do get all of the driver features immediately. So hopefully you guys can see over here with this black enhanced overcoat, since it knows I'm working with the 9500, it immediately gives me the option to turn that on, which is a really cool feature. If anyone has seen that out there, it gives you an incredibly deep, rich black, kind of a wet look is what they call it, but a really cool new thing on these new P95, 75s, and they're going to have something very similar for the P700s and 900s as well. So that's very exciting. As you can see down here, same, I've got my profiles. I can either let my printer manage it, or I can say, hey, auto-select the profile that I have in my printer. So when I actually loaded my media, I told the printer I'm using luster paper. So that way when I auto-select, it says, okay, I know what you're using already, and you can just change that rendering intent as you see fit. What I want to show you here as well, if your image is already pretty much finished as far as the design side goes, we do have a few options as far as templates. I know people are using this for some of their mask templates now. People using like the F570. This is a very useful tool to kind of get you up and running off the ground without having to spend the $30 a month for Photoshop or something like that. So a lot of powerful tools in here. Again, I don't want to call it a graphic editor. I just want to call it a very, very strong print driver. I think the best way I can explain that. So let's talk a little bit about the ink set as well. So this particular printer I'm showing you here is the P20000. And the reason I want to show you this one is because you can see we've got a gray, a light gray, I've got a dark gray, and I've got my blacks. So we have a very significant, for our gradients, for any of our black and whites, if we're dealing with those neutral tones, we have a very strong ink set to work with. For those of you who are new to the term, the best way to describe dynamic range would be kind of your comparison between your lightest point and your darkest point in your photo. So the best way I would say it is if you have a solid white point or if you have a deep black point, the differences between those two are going to be our dynamic range. Now, the ink set is going to be really, for the final output, what's going to determine how well we can hit those. Now, I will say Epson has an amazing feature with an advanced black and white mode. So if you are working with black and white, any kind of photography portraits, it can be a strong tool to work with to adjust a little bit of those colors, the basic hue of the entire image. And that's also built into Epson print layout, and you can also access that from the print driver as well. So kind of a cool couple features there that can really get you pretty spot on results. Now, one quick thing I want to mention here too is, let's just say we have that file prep for our P20000. We know it nice and well. Now, when I move that same file over to, let's say, the 9570 with a slightly different ink set, we are going to see differences in the print. So again, it goes back to Cmyk being device dependent. Each time even a minor change can happen, we will see differences. Especially, I definitely don't encourage this to anyone out there, but those folks who think that they can get away with some of the third-party media or third-party inks and stuff such of that nature, all I can say is good luck, because now we're not having a consistent ink set across the board, and that can definitely cause some serious issues in the long term. This is a question that I get asked fairly regularly, I suppose, is the kind of, should I be working in Adobe RGB or Srgb? And, I'll tell you, it's one of those things, you scour the forums, you'll hear every answer under the sun. Now, I did include this. This Ken Rockwell, and it was a great article. And here's the thing about Adobe. Yes, we can see right here that it's a little bit expanded past the Srgb gamut. However, it's important to know if you're working with that Adobe RGB, your final output has to have a way to actually interpret that. So what a lot of people see is working in RGB without really, Adobe RGB, without having the proper infrastructure set up, is your colors actually may start to appear duller. So again, I would say Srgb is a safe place. That's going to be your most universal. Now, if you're dealing with some of these higher end softwares like Onyx, for instance, it does have an Adobe PostScript engine in there. So when we put it in there, it is able to interpret and kind of determine a little bit better what we were shooting for, a little more accurately as well. But I would say, to keep everything kind of consistent and safe, the Srgb is going to be a very comfortable place for everybody. And I just wanted to throw this up there. There are a few there's a few kind of options. So, Photoshop is what a lot of folks use, and that's what I'm still using here today. Onyx, Caldera, Wasatch, all of them are soft reps that do the same thing. They're going to take those RGB values, convert it into a universal value that the printer can actually understand at the end of the day there. So I'll say, as far as the software goes, Onyx is a strong one. Flexi is a strong one for solvent printing as well. But hey, there's nothing wrong with using the Epson print layout tool. I can guarantee you we can get absolutely fantastic results with that as well. So just a few options out there if you want to do a little bit of deep diving into it. Actually, I do want to go back real quick on the software and just mention one thing that's kind of cool, and especially this is Onyx, and I know the other software have similar features as well. A dynamic link. So let's say I'm working with maybe 4 different printers. Maybe I've got a P20000, a 9570, maybe I've got a P900 or a P700 as well. What I can do is I can actually limit everything to basically the most reduced gamut. So that way, if I'm sending this to multiple printers at once, I will never exceed that. So we can actually have a more consistent print across the board and across multiple units. So that's really where, in my opinion, the soft reps start to come in handy when your shop starts to expand. Now, if you're, one shop, one printer, one software, there's nothing wrong with Photoshop or any of the other ones out there as well. Last, I want to kind of finish on what I call the finish strong, right? So if we have everything set properly, we can actually just check these last settings. So you can see I was letting Photoshop manage my colors here. My printer profile, I already selected the media, which is my photo luster. Just for the ease of use, I did my normal printing, render intent at perceptual, and then the black point compensation, like I said, since we are converting that from an RGB to a Cmyk space, we want to make sure that our black point is represented properly across the board. So there have been times when I've seen a black point can cause either issues, but I'd say for the majority of uses, black point compensation is going to be worth it to leave on majority of the time there. So I know that was a lot of talk and a lot of terms. I do kind of want to open this up at this point, though. If there's any kind of questions that maybe I'm sure there probably were that popped up during the webinar here. So if anyone has anything, just go ahead and pop it into either the chat or into the Q&A, and then we'll answer them all real time here. Steve, thanks, Steve. I really appreciate that. Oh, yep, absolutely. Onyx. Yep. So here's the thing, and I think Jim answered that perfectly well. Is if you are a major player and you do need to have consistency across multiple machines, multiple media types, the RIPs do actually make a strong difference. It can come into play significantly. But again, if I'm doing maybe some portraits, or if I'm just doing most of my stuff in-house, one computer, one printer, don't think that that's something you need to spend an extra $2,000 on or something of that nature. Any questions, guys, that kind of popped up while we were going through any of that stuff? Just out of curiosity, are most of you guys out there coming from a P-series background, or are you guys photographers, or what's kind of the big thing out there? Perfect.
So Zach, one of the questions is, will this be available? And it's, I believe this is being recorded. And
yes, sir. Excellent. Yep.
Where would you find it afterwards? Is it emailed or?
That's, what, we actually, and I'll put this one up again, or if you want to, Vincent, that imagingspectrum.com/training. So it's usually about maybe 3 to 4 days after the presentation. We always throw these up online. And then with these 2 graphic presentations, we are going to include a PDF document with some of these links. So hopefully you guys noticed in there, under a lot of these topics, there were links that we can check out. So if you want to do a little bit more deep diving, get some more of the terminology, maybe some of the science behind it, I absolutely encourage that. So if you guys want to check out imagingspectrum.com/training, all of our old videos are on there, and then give it time, the new videos we posted, as well as what we have coming up in the future. Hey, Lee, I just saw your question. Great one. Lee's saying he's having problems with his calibrating your 9570 versus the 9900. Can you give us a little bit on that, Lee? Is it, are you noticing vibrancy issues, or is it something where not as bright as the previous print, or what's the? And do know that you know, they are different ink sets, so there will be a little differences between the two. And depending what we're printing out of, you know, if we left the settings the exact same for both, we're not going to have the exact same result across both, as you can probably imagine. But if you're seeing just kind of maybe a gamma shift or something like that, you know, we can always make changes to that. But Lee, if you ever have questions, definitely call in, and we can get that going. Ah, okay, no problem, Lee. Actually, that's a great one. And I have seen this a couple times. Now, I will say I probably would encourage you to shift the gamma to a 1.8 there. I believe the defaults now with these new ones is a 2.2, right around that area. So if we can actually adjust that, and we can adjust that within the driver itself. But I definitely, you know, if you have any questions on that, call in, and then you and I can actually kind of sit down and we can go over a few of those things as well. Alison, great question. How accurate are the pre-made manufacturer's paper compared to the custom-made color profile? And I'll give you my 2 cents on this. I think they are incredible. Now, to me, especially to my eye, obviously nothing's going to compete with us sitting there and physically calibrating our own and getting it to our exact specifications. Obviously, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But I will say, for those of you who want to just kind of get up and running off the bat there, I'd say they're almost perfect, you know, especially if you're dealing with the Epson media. I will say some of the third parties out there, I can't vouch for them just because I'm not sure exactly, you know, how the calibration was done, what it was done on, and a few things of that. But I'd say for the most part, I've been very, very happy on both the solvent and the P series side as well. Carrie, sorry, just pass that. Oh, Michael asked this as well, and I'm going to get back to yours, Carrie. Give me 1 second. Are the accessories for the spectroproofer? We didn't get into those, but absolutely. So you can add a spectroproofer, and it's the same one that was used in the 9000, 7000 series. So, you know, if it's something that you're dealing with incredibly hypercritical every time, I would say that's a very valuable purchase for anyone. And basically, what it's going to do is kind of read those values and automate essentially the process for us there. Carrie, I want to get to yours real quick. Carrie asked, it's been recommended to use the Grackle settings for color management across equipment. And what are your thoughts on this? Now, I will say, are you proofing, Carrie, is what it sounds like to me. And a lot of that's going to depend on who, you know, where this is going and who the final output is going to. So nothing wrong with Grackle. Swap's a common one too. Like I said, you know, I would really kind of want to know more about where this print is being sent to, and a lot of times that they'll give you kind of a recommendation for. But on that note, you know, that's something we can do a little bit of a deeper dive into as well, Gary. Oh, real quick here, I just got a great question from Don. He's wanting to do dye sublimation on the metal and need to profile the substrate as well. Great question, Don. So, you know, again, I don't want to dive super deep, but I do want to give you, you know, at least a starting point here. So when it comes to dye sublimation, we're dealing with 2 things. Metal's a little bit more forgiving, but we are still dealing with potential reflections. So if you are going to create a specific profile for that, I would suggest X1 has a new, or X-Rite, excuse me, has a new spectrophotometer out called the i3. Now, the i3 has been really calibrated to deal with dye sublimation quite well. It's able to kind of compensate for reflections. It's able to especially be really strong on fabrics, which was kind of a notorious issue before. So, you know, if you really want to do the deep dive, Don, I'd say at that point, we're definitely looking to a spectrophotometer. We'll actually profile it directly onto whatever material it is that we're transferring to. And that way we can have an idea, much more color accurate finished product there. Oh, Alicia, great question. She's talking about, she has the DNP, the RX1 for photo booth printing. She says she hasn't calibrated her screen, and that's fine, you know, and you know, like I said, without spending some of these, you know, $1,000, $2,000 screens, you know, we're not going to get the Hollywood level calibrated monitors right out of the box. So, you know, that's always a little bit of a fight. More often than not, the thing I'd say on that is, to me, the brightness is kind of one of the bigger kind of combatants, if you will. You know, you really max out that brightness on your screen. You think everything is just popping, but then when it comes off, you're kind of like, well, that's a little dull. Again, we're pushing our screens to the limit at that point. But one thing, Alicia, too, is definitely check and make sure that you have, now for photo booth printing, if you're using the darkroom software, I believe those profiles are already built into it. So, you know, just make sure you're not doubling down on those profiles. Sometimes if it's the Windows driver, but DNP should play fairly well. Now, another thing to mention here is, you know, the files that we're starting with. Using Breeze, okay, no worries. So with Breeze, and I'm not as familiar with Breeze, but I know it does have, you can input those color profiles into there. So we can definitely talk a little bit more on that one later. But with the software there, we just need to make sure that we do have a profile built in for that specific RX1. And of course, you know, if we're dealing with, not to make things more confusing, but, you know, if it's our file or if our, excuse me, our photograph is coming out maybe darker, if we're having to make corrections like that, that can all factor in. But oh, so Carrie's talking, she's perfect. Thank you, Carrie. So she's doing proofing, and she's doing both output, so she's outsourcing, but she's also doing it inside of the shop as well. And here's what I'd say, kind of find out where the digital copies are being sent and what they're using. So that way you can kind of keep it consistent. So if you do something in shop, if they're using that Grackle, you can use it as well and know that, hey, if I need to knock out a couple of these in shop, then that's fine too, and it's going to be consistent for you as well. Michael, great question, and absolutely. Michael's asking if the SpectroProofer for the 7500 and 9500 series will be different. And you can switch them right over. If anything, I might recommend, depending on how long you've had it there, the sensor element might just need a either replaced or cleaning, but absolutely, they are perfect. Thank you, Alicia. That's the best way, definitely, for any of this stuff, because what we can do is actually sit down in front of a computer. You know, we can log into yours if need be, and then we can actually kind of see where the settings are. You know, one of those things, you never know. Something might have got bumped somewhere, and then we just need to kind of find it and hit that switch. But absolutely, Michael, back to that, yes, 100% right. You can use those older SpectroProofers with the newer printers as well. I'm hoping I didn't miss anybody here. All of a sudden, questions are popping in, which I love. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Zach, it's
yeah.
Jim. I wanted to jump in here for the fun of creating a great deal of confusion.
Absolutely.
Julie asked a question about what about when you're scanning traditional artwork, or
great.
for that matter, shooting an original file.
Thank you.
A topic we didn't cover today by intent was the other end of color management, which is creating input profiles as opposed to output profiles. And there are some similar concepts that can be used to, whether that's on a scanner or even with a camera with, like a Macbeth color checker. And you can literally build an input profile against a known ICC reference standard that puts your files into a known RGB color state that then makes it much easier to predict the output through good color management that we talked about today. So if you're doing scanning or even photography and you really need close matches, a whole separate topic is color management for the input side.
Absolutely. Thank you for chiming in on that, Jim. And I will say, you know, there is a video on our site. It was we did a video shoot for Cooperlux, who that's exactly what they were doing, fine art. So they were taking in very, very high-end art. They had a scan back system, and that's exactly what they were doing, was creating those profiles. So it's a really cool one to check out, just to kind of see how some of these major players out there kind of run their operations. Julie, would that be in the training? I mean, it's absolutely something we can help you out with. Now, you know, wouldn't be on site, but it's something we can absolutely talk you through if it's something you need any help with. Are you coming from a P series, Julie? What are you using right now for your printer? Perfect. Absolutely. And so I will say, you know, those new 7570s and 9570s, I have been definitely in love with. So if you have questions on that too, just a real quick kind of couple things, if for those of you who haven't done much of the deep diving into it. They did the matte black switching, so now you don't have to worry about jumping from a luster to a matte canvas. The speed is significantly faster, and you get that wider ink set. So 99% Gamut. Forget commercial standard. We're going to give it all to you. You know, everything you're going to have out of the box. So yeah, if you have any questions on that, definitely, and we'll help you out with any of that stuff, Julie. Not a problem.
Hey, Zach, it's Jim. I want to jump in on another one over
Perfect.
on the question and answer side. Margaret asked the question. Margaret, it's not at all silly. It's actually can be very confusing at times, but any of these inkjet printers, by their very design, are what would be called a CMYK printer. There are printers that are what some of you in the event space would be using, like a DNP printer, for example, that print with CMY and not a K, that are in effect a RGB printer, like what they would use in a lab. But for anything that's an inkjet output, it's some flavor of a CMYK, though, as Zach pointed out, CMYK could also be a 6-color, an 8-color, 10, or even 12-color printer. At the end, it's still CMYK, though.
Thanks for that, Jim. Absolutely. And Billy, I just saw right underneath the Margaret's comment there. Billy was asking about trouble getting Icc profiles. He's coming from an Epson S4600. And Billy, I didn't. Are you using the Epson Edge dashboard? I know that they do have a few profiles in there for both Oracle and 3M. Now, I'm not going to say they have every single profile, under the sun, but a lot of the majors will definitely be in there. So if you have more questions on that, Billy, definitely call in and I can help you out to get you set up on that side if you haven't.
Perfect. I think you even have a video I watched yesterday of that.
Yeah, we do. Thanks for saying that, Morgan. Absolutely. And so I saw that Vincent posted on here as well. So if you want to check out our YouTube, we do have a lot of videos and we're always adding more. So, and I'm actually, that's a good segue too. So if there's ever something that you guys, maybe want to do a little bit of a deep dive into, send something my way and maybe we'll talk about it and see if we can get it on one of these new webinars, these next webinars here. But Laura, I just saw your comment. I know there's a lot. There is a lot to colors management, and not to make it even, not to scare you further, but we literally just scraped that surface. We really just touched it. So don't worry. I don't want you guys to get stuck in the point where it's all you're thinking about. But I want you guys to realize that when these prints aren't coming out maybe exactly as expected, there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes than just my printer's not working right or my computer's off or something like that. There's a lot of factors that can come into play there. Oh, Steve, I just, sorry if I missed this one earlier, but I saw you were asking about, the certain monitors that are out there. And there's definitely some bad boys. I mean, I will say that, there's a couple monitors that aren't going to break the bank. You're not going to, those $2,000, $3,000 monitors, that's when we start getting into, we really, really are working with major players. We got to stay color accurate across the board. And I do recommend a hood. I mean, it's a huge thing. I know we kind of just touched on it, but with the lighting, I mean, unless you're really spending the big bucks, lighting is fairly inconsistent. You could be viewing it in front of a tungsten light, or it could be something where you have a bright white LED. So anyway, yeah, you make a good point there. Perfect, Billy. Yep, absolutely. Let us know if you need any help on that. Yeah, see if you can find that video. Oh, Margaret, thank you. And I just actually really just touched on that. So Margaret made a good point, is under our print preferences, we had match color gamut. We had match color, I had the gamut warning, and I also had the show paper white. So let me just really quick run back to that. You guys can kind of see that there. Good catch. So under my match print colors, gamut warning, and show paper white, it's kind of a soft proof. So with my match print colors, and you can, if you guys have Photoshop, I definitely suggest doing this. But if you kind of click on this in the show paper white as well, it'll actually give you a better indicator on the media that it's being sent to. So we'll be able to match the colors, the white point, and the gamut warning is going to show. Now black and white, this one right here is probably not the best example, but let's just say I had an extreme red that I know that I can't hit with this particular ink set. It's going to give me like zebra lines that are basically saying, hey, this is going to be out of gamut. We're going to shift it for you, but know that this is going to shift. So good checks there. It's not going to make a major difference on your actual print, but it gives you a good soft proof so you can kind of see with your eye before you finally hit that print button. Thanks for bringing that up. Allison asked, on the 9570, how much longer, if any, does it take for the overprint to dry, or rather overcoated print to dry? And so I think you're talking about on the enhanced black overcoat. And the cool thing is, with the way that they have this set up, is it's just the same. Now, it's going to take a little bit longer to actually run the print because we're basically laying down a second layer of ink there. However, when it comes off that printer, it is ready to rock. Obviously, with some of these deep blacks, be careful. I wouldn't recommend shoving your fingerprints or your thumbs on or anything like that. But for the most part, if you're playing it safe, it'll be ready. As soon as it's finished, it'll be ready to go. Guys, great questions. I really appreciate your participation here. Make sure there's nothing. Perfect. Margaret, great. I love what you're doing here. And you know, like we can do a whole nother dive on, you know, light and color temperature and all that stuff as well. But you know, a lot of it's going to come down, especially if you're a one print shop. You know, once you have that calibration set and you know what's coming through there, you're going to have all the control. A lot of this is going to be if you're outsourcing as well as doing things in house, that you can keep it consistent across the board. Don, great question. Yes, the Epson dye sub inks are always, yep, we'll make sure we always have those. Any consumables that you guys need for the Epsons, if you're curious out there, we absolutely have those, as well as blanks too. So I don't know if some of you guys might know, but we have started selling masks now too. We have a lot of the Chromalex panels, which are fantastic, pre-coated. They print just unbelievably well. You know, if you need some basics on that, definitely let us know. We have a lot of those materials in stock. Any maintenance tanks, any inks you need, trust me, we got you covered there. We got a pretty big warehouse in the back, so we can store whatever you need. Oh, perfect. And thanks, Vincent. And Vincent just linked there to our products there for the Epson. And you know, of course, guys, if you have, I know that we're talking about color today, but you know, I want to open it up. So if you guys have more questions when it comes to, I know dye sub is a hot topic right now, maybe heat pressing, and know that as well. You know, when we're jumping from like a P series to a F series, we have more factors to deal with, right? What's our pressure? What's our timing? What's our heat temperature set to? So there's a few things that we need to kind of dial in. But again, once we have those dialed, those will kind of be our set and forget settings. Margaret, I just saw that you were asking about it looks better in 5,000 Kelvin there. So, and one thing, and it depends on the monitor you're using. Sometimes you can actually adjust that, and it's dependent on the brand. Some of the really high-end ones you can actually have like a little, it's like a hockey puck you click on, and it'll automatically adjust that temperature for you. But you know, there's I'm sure it's something probably a setting you can find in the manual there. If not, we can help out. Well, all right, guys. I think the questions have kind of thanks, Margaret. I do. I love the masks too. And these ones that we have are really cool because they're polyester, so they sublimate really great, but you can slip a filter into them as well. So, you know, you get the added protection that you would, you know, we like to play it safe, obviously. We don't want anyone getting sick or hurt out there. So kind of a best of both worlds, if you will. And then if you really start getting into the big stuff, you know, now we're starting to get into the whole print and cut world. And then that's a whole nother awesome thing that we can jump into. Yes, I do. I do work. We're all imaging spectrum here, and then Morgan is with Epson America. Oh, Margaret, I'm Zach. Thanks for asking. Steve says, speed at 1440. Does it make a visual difference? Magnified, you know, depends on settings. At 6040 will take all day, and then allow others to preview a test print. Steve, I hope I'm understanding this question properly. Are you saying, you know, are we going to get reduced speed at 1440? And I think you answered that. Absolutely, you're right. And a lot of it does depend. I mean, are we doing this onto canvas? You know, is this going on to some really high-end, you know, incredibly luster 260 or something like that, where we have just an incredible BMX? Do we need, you know, a lot of those factors depend. So I would say, you know, depending on the substrate, depending on the media that you're transferring onto. Like a 6040, especially if it was canvas, to me, there's nothing wrong with the 720. As a matter of fact, you'll notice even in the drivers, sometimes when you try to bump it up past like a quality 3, it won't even let you because it knows it's canvas, so there's no reason to push it beyond what's necessary. So yeah, so hopefully answered a few things, and thanks, Vincent. I always appreciate you in the background. So that's our phone number as well, 214-342-9290. So, you know, if you guys, and I always, you know, it's fun to get a one-on-one. That way we can really dive in, and I'll have to kind of jump around, and we can just focus on exactly what you guys are focused on there. So awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. Like I said, this is a really great participation. I hope, and I know a lot of this stuff is just kind of like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot. But again, I just want to kind of get these terms out there and then give you some of the resources so you can, on your own time. And, if you're like me, pop open the old YouTube portal and, be careful. Be careful to misinformation, but, there's some good stuff out there. Allison, great question. And this is something I am actually curious myself, and maybe Morgan can chime in here. Appreciate it, Don. Allison asks, was Epson make a 60-inch or a 64-inch maybe P9570 series printer? And I can tell you from the P20000 is still a strong contender. But I don't know, Morgan, is there anything on that?
So thanks for the feedback. Yeah, the P20000 is a great printer. The P9570 and 7570 are fairly new printers that just came out into the market, and so we're always taking customer feedback, and we'll let them know about that and the desire of a 60-inch 9570 with that color set. So we'll let them know. But as far as anything out there right now, we don't have any 60-inch printer with 9570 color sets.
And I will say, guys, if you don't know about the P20000, it actually does have, and definitely chime in, Morgan, if I'm off here, but same print head that the 9570. So you're getting the same speed. You're still getting the matte black switching. The really only difference is the ink set is just slightly different. I will say, though, people doing black and white seem to prefer the P20000 because with the inclusion of the dark gray and those grays, it's pretty impressive.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Perfect. Carrie, I wish. Unfortunately, the print layout tool only works with the new Sure colors. I believe it is the 6000 and above, or the P5000, 6, 7, 8, 9 and above. Unfortunately, with some of the older units, it does not work, unfortunately. Steve, actually, that's a really interesting question. And, I'm going to probably do a little bit of diving into that. I'll be honest, all my tablets have been the just like the Intuos Pro style, nothing with the, with non-screen, I should say. So I know that Wacom has a way to calibrate that. I don't know off the top of my head right now, but I can definitely look into that for you. Anything else, guys? Oh, sorry, Steve, if I didn't reiterate that question. I try to say the question before I say an answer, though. All right, well, I think hopefully I didn't miss anything here. If I did, just go ahead and chime in, but oh, awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah. And like I said, I really just want to get these terms out there. I mean, gosh, we could spend, people spend full degrees on this, full master's programs. So I do want to just kind of get those terms going. And then obviously, if you guys ever want to really do some more diving in, please call in. That's the best way to do it. That way we can talk one-on-one and get exactly what you need taken care of. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for joining. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Allison. And like I said, guys, huge props to everyone for really participating here today. This is always the best way to do it. Let's all talk about what we got going on. Let's figure out something together, and then hopefully we can all come out a little bit more educated at the end of the day there. And go ahead and, for those of you getting out of here, I want to always put up our number here at the end just in case you need any of that information. And again, guys, thanks. And hopefully, we'll definitely be doing more of these. We're trying to do about 1 a week here. So definitely stay tuned for the next one. We'll probably be doing a graphics part 3 down the road a little bit, but when we dive into that one, I want to really focus on a little bit more of the specifics in each category there. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, guys. Thanks, Jim, for joining us. Thanks, Vincent, for all the help here today. I know Morgan just signed off, so much appreciation to him as well. Like I said, guys, it was good talking to everybody. Call in. Let's chat. Let's see what's going on out there. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks to all of you for joining us.
All right, have a good day, guys.